One question that has bothered me my whole life needs to be answered today. Do I like Alien 3? Well, I'm not sure. I first caught the film on cable as a teenager. I had heard mixed things from people and I had no real expectations going in. Now that I've seen the film a few times over the years, I think I can finally break down my feelings on this. So most of you know the story. This movie was in production hell and David Fincher had an awful time making it. For me, it's the only movie he's made that I don't really like or love. It's not his fault. The story behind the film and its production is the thing of legend. What shocks me about Alien 3 is that I have the same experience every time I watch it. The movie starts, and I'm upset Hicks, Newt, and Bishop are basically dead. Hicks, Newt, and Bishop, right? And this is the big controversy the film always had. It starts with the death of 3 of the main characters from the previous film. This is something that really hits fans hard, you know, and it hit people really hard at the time. Even in retrospect, it feels off because there's something sort of cold about it, something distant that doesn't feel right. In an Alien 3 script written by William Gibson, Hicks sent Ripley's body off to keep her safe. I think this would have worked better, like have Ripley send Hicks and Newt's bodies off the planet or the colony. This way we could see maybe them in a sequel later on, and it wouldn't give the movie that odd opening where they're dead. I think it would have been much better to just have Ripley at some point send their sleep pods away, and that way we'd go, oh, okay, well, Hicks and Newt are gone. Now, after that, I actually think Alien 3 gets really good. That's the weird part. Ripley being on a prison colony is genius. The threat on her getting raped goes back to the first movie, and it's a scary situation. I also like how pragmatic Ripley is here. She quickly adjusts to her situation and takes control like we know she will. Now, Tywin Lannister comes in and the movie just fucking pops. Weaver and him have amazing chemistry and the dialogue between them is really compelling. It's some of the best dialogue in the series. At this moment in the first act, Alien 3 has found its footing and it's got a good setup. There is a dog xenomorph and that's pretty cool. Something new to the franchise. And they started shooting without a finished script, and it shows after a point. This movie feels like it's missing a lot. But the thing is, like, that first act of Alien 3, that first part with Tywin Lannister and Ripley landing on this planet and all that stuff is really good stuff, actually, once you get over the initial death of those characters. Now, the assembly cut does fix a lot of this. There are changes that really work, and the movie being longer kind of benefits it. There's something to it, more of an idea of what the finished product could have been and what Fincher's vision was. But he had nothing to do with the assembly cut, and I still think it's really, really flawed. Even the assembly cut has this off feeling. I've never been able to put it into words, but there's something about the way this movie feels that turns me off to it. Movies put you in a mood. Like, whenever I watch Lost in Translation on cable, there's this feeling like I'm in the bar with Bill Murray and Scarlett Johansson. Whenever I watch Alien 3, it gives me this very cynical vibe, and it almost feels like the movie doesn't want me to watch it. It's hard for me to finish. I always get kind of grossed out, but not in that awesome, over-the-top gore way like in a Videodrome or the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I just don't like looking or listening to the film. The bald heads, lighting, mood, and overall situation just feels off to me. Maybe it's costumes, editing. Little things like that make a movie what it is, and I think they lost the mystery. There isn't much to figure out in Alien 3. It feels like more of a straightforward and familiar thriller than the previous 2 movies. It lacks vision. This is no doubt due to Fincher fighting with the studio and the poor use of money up to this point. The movie is kind of a miracle considering what happened, and it actually made $160 million worldwide in 1992. To a lot of people, it killed the franchise. To other fans, it's an underrated gem that ended things right. So do I like the movie? Yes? No? I don't know. What can I say? It's a mixed bag. There's good stuff and bad stuff throughout, and I think the bad, or at least the mediocre elements, kind of take over the movie. It's not as bad as its reputation, but it's not the classic some people want it to be. Alien 3 could have been a great movie. The biggest issue is the characters aren't very memorable, and you distance from the story. You know, I think the William Gibson script is awesome and would have been better direction to go with this. Alien 3 hardly explores the darker elements it hits at early on, and it's never scary. I'm not sure what the movie is really trying to be. There isn't a lot of deep sci-fi here, there's not a lot of action, and it's not really a horror film. I guess it's a drama? It's just kind of a dull and lame drama, though. Nothing really happens, and you wonder if you really needed this movie. Still, I think we would have liked if they would have just stopped here and just let it stay dead, like we just had the original 3 films. I still think this is the 3rd best film in the Alien franchise. And it's not one I watch often. You know, Prometheus was more impressive visually to me. But I give this one the edge because I like Ripley in this a lot, and I hated everyone in Prometheus, and Sigourney Weaver is terrific in Alien 3. She's actually really good here. A lot of people die in this movie, but not a lot of the deaths have weight, though. I think budget might have always been the issue here. Maybe the studio didn't know how much to spend on this, and they didn't want to put money into the movie. They should have put a lot more money into this movie. Also, the other scripts and ideas I've read just sound more interesting than the stuff that was in this. The potential is what kills Alien 3. You know this could have been a great movie, and it pisses you off that it isn't. You root for the movie, but Fincher didn't get to shine here. It lacks so much of his craft. Seven cost $33 million to make and looks much better than this movie and has aged better than this movie. I'm not sure what happened. Alien 3 falls apart. They kill Tywin Lannister, and it just fucking ruins the movie when they do this, because he was the only aspect giving the movie any emotional substance. After his death, the movie gets messy, and all the bald guys in the prison feel like the same person. It reminded me of the bald Germans in Saving Private Ryan. The movie has great ideas, though. Ripley dying is not a bad idea, and the movie having a running theme about death is also really interesting. My issue is more execution. The 3rd act of this movie just doesn't work. The big speech Ripley gives is like the cheesiest fucking thing ever. There's just this big dumb chase, and some of the special effects look awful. Some of the puppet work and stuff like that. I mean, they should have just went with CGI. This is one of those times that CGI completely would have been the right way to go. ILM, CGI Alien, because the actual... It's crazy to say because I love practical effects, but the actual puppet work here and the practical effects works they try to do stuff, it looks awful. It really looks awful. A lot of it's with lighting and background and stuff. It just doesn't look good. It looks cheap. And it looks a lot worse than the stuff in the first 2 movies. I mean, it looks more dated than Alien did in the 70s, which is weird. I could get behind a Ripley teaming up with Tywin Lannister movie. They form this bond and fight the alien while the prisoners are getting taken out. The 3rd act would be badass. The 2 of them walking around a prison looking for Spike as Wayland Yutani breaks in with Marines. So they're Space Marines, and Ripley and Tywin are fighting off the Space Marines, and there's a xenomorph running around, and it's all tense. It should have been a really exciting 3rd act. Instead, Ripley has an alien inside her. Wayland comes to get it with a dude who looks like Bishop. I guess he created Bishop. And I like this idea. And I also like the scene with Bishop earlier in the movie. This stuff is actually kind of clever. And it works from a storytelling point of view within this movie. Ripley jumping to her death with an alien bursting out of her chest, though, man. It goes all Return of the King style on you with Gollum in the ring. This never worked for me. Not Ripley dying or anything, just the way this is set up. How it plays out, and the visual of Ripley dying is just awful. It's really bad background, like... blue screen CGI. It looks like shit. This movie has good cinematography, too. The set design is great, and Weaver's great in it, right? Like, good cinematography, good set design, some good acting from the main group, right? The main leads. However, I think everyone else is kind of forgettable outside of Charles Dance, and they kill his ass off. And they try to make Dylan's character interesting, and I don't hate him, but I felt like it was kind of melodramatic and cliche, like I knew where his character was going. Once again, there's a lack of mystery here. The assembly cut brings in more of those religious aspects that were missing from the theatrical cut, but even that, to me, doesn't flesh out the movie enough. I never really wanted the Alien franchise to go down this route of religion and this redemption story for these prisoners. It's not uninteresting. Like I said, there's something there, but it's just... I've just seen it before. I've seen that kind of story and that kind of thing before done better in many other movies. It's the first 2 Alien films. I haven't seen many films do what they do better. Alien 3, I've seen a movie like this many times, and it's nothing above average. The issue with Alien 3, though, is tone and focus. All the good stuff isn't the focus, and the tone is all over the damn place. The first act's great, then the budget issues become fucking obvious, and you realize this movie's going to be small. I don't mind the return to basics approach, right? You can't give me something that basic if you're going to try to do raw Alien, though. Like, you can't give me something this simplistic if you're going back to the first movie. Fincher was the right choice, but this movie lacks his polish, as everything feels fucking cliche. The chase scenes, the dialogue, and movement of the movie are not really anything above average. Some dialogue is. There are dialogue sequences in the assembly cut that were cut from the theatrical cut, and some scenes that are really good dialogue sequences. that are worth listening to and going back to. It's like, wow, this is much better dialogue than some of the sequences in Aliens. But dialogue doesn't make a movie. This isn't just this movie's driven by dialogue, though. It's weird. The score by Elliot Goldenthal is actually pretty good. It's not one of the best ever, but it's all right. I do recommend the assembly cut. But the movie kind of fails as a genre piece, right? It's not scary. It's not heavy on ideas or filled with awesome action set pieces or gore effects. It has gore and stuff, but something just doesn't look right. The sound mix of this movie, the lighting, something about those sequences never really worked for me, the horror elements of the movie. There's certain moments that really work for me visually that I think are as good as anything in the first two movies, because it's David fucking Fincher. But, yeah, I think if the studio had actually put $70-80 million into this movie, went with some CG and let Fincher do what he wants, this probably could have been a pretty good to great movie. Instead, you could just tell it had production screw-ups behind the whole thing, and even the assembly cut can't fix that, because those mistakes are always going to be in the movie. They'd have to go, like Fincher said, you'd have to go reshoot the whole damn movie. Okay, the movie is so dialogue-driven, though, and this doesn't bother me until they kill off Charles Dance, right? It pisses me off more than them killing off Newt, Hicks, and Bishop. When I first saw this film on cable, I was enjoying it. I didn't know why people had an issue with this movie. Then as soon as he dies, it's like the movie died for me, and they never kill off another, and they kill off another great side character after that in the Warden. See, the Warden and Charles Dance character, Clemens, are the two best things in this movie besides Ripley. Clemens is interesting. It forms a very dynamic human relationship with Ripley. You want to know this guy, and of course it's a great performance. And the Warden's a great character and really interesting. They kill the two of them off so early on in this movie. After that, the movie, it loses so much of its momentum, right? The movie doesn't feel coherent anymore after this point, and the depressing tone just feels off to the sequels. You know, it doesn't feel right as a sequel to Aliens. As a sequel to Aliens, this is terrible, but I'm trying to look at it as its own film. But even as its own film, I can get over the deaths of Newt, Bishop, and Hicks, right? I can't get over killing off Clemens and the Warden that way, because they were so good that when you kill them, it hurts what the dynamic of the movie could have been, the character development between those three characters, and I think they should have made it to the third act. I don't mind you killing them. It's just they were killed way too early, and it doesn't make any sense. It only hurts the movie. I felt this way the first time I saw the film on cable, and every time I watch Alien 3, I have the same experience. I'm like, oh, that's weird they killed off those characters. And then I start to really enjoy the movie for a while. And then when that happens, when they start killing off those characters, I'm like, man, this just doesn't feel right. And then the movie just gets messier, and it feels like a collection of scenes. We get the almost rape scene, and we get all these fucking we get the chase scenes, and then finally, and it just, and all the bald guys and some of the dialogue and stuff from those characters just is awful to me. It's some of the worst stuff in the franchise. Not the main leads, not the the main group of people that are the leads of this movie, but some awful side performances in my opinion. And I really don't like that that big speech scene in the movie. I own the Blu-ray, and the behind-the-scenes stuff is more interesting than the actual movie. It's truly worth looking into, the documentaries and stuff about this film. As a fan of the franchise, I kind of look at the first three films as a trilogy. I try to ignore Resurrection, despite loving the director's other work who made that film. Alien 4 is craptastic, but the way Ripley comes back into the story is just fucking bonkers. Like, they got her blood and cloned her or some shit. I'm not doing the whole story justice about the production of this movie, right? There's so much to go into. There's so much to go into that would be a long video. I just wanted to give my thoughts on Alien 3. I know a lot of people seem to love this movie nowadays. Like, its reputation is really growing. But I still think it doesn't really work, and it makes the Xenomorph feel less interesting, and that's the biggest crime I think it commits, is that the Xenomorph takes a secondary role and becomes less interesting to this drama, religious redemption story with Ripley and these prisoners, this drama, character-driven film. It fails because it ultimately is a sci-fi film that's a sequel to these other films, and it has the Xenomorph in it, and the Xenomorph feels secondary. It feels slapped in. It doesn't feel organic to the movie like the other two did. It doesn't even feel like it's driving the movie. It feels like it's in another movie, and I don't like that about the Xenomorph. I like Spike the dog, and I like the ox in the assembly cut because it's got this religious symbolism and stuff, but I never felt like the Xenomorph has much presence in this movie. It feels like it's barely there, and the effects don't help it, except, like I said, there's a few effect shots in this movie that are badass. And do you like this movie? You know, let me know in the comments and go into detail why you like it. Like, go into really big detail why you like this movie so maybe I can understand better. And if you hate this movie, awesome, do the same. Go into detail to why you hate it. I want to figure this out. Like, I want to know, but, you know, do we come back to it? Do I like Alien 3? And I guess I'm going to have to say no, in the sense that I don't think it's a very good movie. Because I think with the production and the budget issues and the script issues, there's just too many things here that weren't working on the set that still come across and really hold this movie back. And I've never been a fan of the original theatrical cut's cynical tone. It's way too cynical for me. The assembly cut's way more optimistic and not as cynical, and that's the version I recommend you watch if you're a fan. And watch it on Blu-ray because the ADR is a lot better. The ADR before that on like the DVD release or what is awful. So you get Blu-ray. And Alien 3, the Blu-ray assembly cut is not the worst. It's actually, like I said, I think it's the third best film in the franchise. But it still, to me, doesn't carry over aliens to this. I don't mind, though. We have a theme. We have some rape and penetration, and then we go to motherhood, and then we go to death. And it ends with Ripley's death. So if you can deal with that, thematically it doesn't bother me. I don't mind Ripley dying in this movie. I think they should have stopped there with the death of Ripley, and that should just be the end of the franchise, at least in that sense. No more sequels or anything like that, or these crazy spin-offs. But Alien 3, it's just a weird movie. It's just a strange film. And I like films like it. It reminds me of these films by like Frank Henenlotter, like Basket Case or Brain Damage. It reminds me of these certain type of schlock B movies I really love from the 80s and late 70s. It has a certain feeling about it that's interesting, but it's more my problem with Alien 3 and 4. It's these very talented directors coming in, and their great visual style with these producers makes something that's more of a clusterfuck that creates a weird feeling and not the visionary wonderment that I should be feeling when I watch a David Fincher film or something like that, when I'm watching an Alien film. I never get this grandeur, in-depth feeling when I watch Alien 3. It always kind of leaves me hanging. But like I said, the first act is genuinely good and underrated. And people should go back and look at that. You might forget the first act of this movie after those characters die is really good. I still think the film doesn't hold up. People always tell me the assembly cut. People argue that's the best Alien film, some people, or that it's a better movie than Aliens. It's a better sequel to Alien than Aliens. It's cool if you feel that way. I can't go with you down that road. I wish I could. But let me know what you feel about Alien 3 in the comments. I am interested. I do want to have a discussion about this movie. I don't want us to all just fight about this movie. Let's figure it out. Like, what's the good and bad elements of Alien 3? But I think we can all agree the original theatrical cut that came out in theaters back then, that I think that movie really was the wrong choice, and I think we can all agree on that. Even the fans who like the assembly cut seem to acknowledge the theatrical cut's flawed as fuck. When you watch that movie, could you imagine being in the theater and seeing that movie in '92 after Alien and Aliens? It was just one of the worst things that ever came out from a major studio. This movie could have benefited from waiting a couple years into production to come out later, after Jurassic Park had come out already and stuff like that. This was just one of those movies. I think it was a little bit too early when it was made. I think it would have benefited to be made in 1994 or 1995. Even with David Fincher, I think it would have been better had they waited a little bit. Maybe after he made 7, make Alien 3. Not Alien 327. Anyway, though, thanks for watching. And if you want me to do any more reviews of the Alien franchise, let me know. Because I would love to talk about Resurrection and all that. But, Alien 3 is the black sheep of the franchise, so I thought this would be a pretty fun one to get out. So, see you guys later.